Hi everyone, welcome back to my garage. I don't have an install video for you today, but I thought we would try a different type of video. So one of the things I like to do when I talk to Miata owners is hear about how they acquired the car, what modifications they've made to it, and what their future plans are for the car itself. So I thought that might be a good format to introduce everyone to my NC1 Miata. Just to give you some background, when I bought this car, it was in pretty rough shape. It was found off of Craigslist. The ad listed that the car had a seized motor. The previous owner inadvertently drove around the highway without the oil cap on, and then oil just spewed everywhere, and the engine ended up getting seized. He had it towed to the local Mazda dealership, and they stated the obvious that his engine needed to be replaced. And I assume he either didn't have the funds or didn't have the time to deal with it then, and he ended up just parking it in his downtown condo for about 6 months before he listed the car for sale. In the ad itself, he stated that all it really needs is a new engine and is a perfect candidate for an LS swap. And he asked about $8,000 for the car. So I wrote him and said, look, it's a non-running car and it's been sitting for quite some time. I think, a generous offer on the car would be $4,500. So he kind of balked at that and said, look, bro, all you need is an LS in there, and you'll be doing crazy lap times down at Harris Hill. Because he was apparently a racer as well, and he showed me that he got 129 at Harris Hill on stock wheels and tires, which is actually pretty amazing. Obviously, a LS swap is a lot more involved than he made it sound out to be, because you'll need to, replace the transmission, replace all the subframe, and, you're probably looking at a $20,000 conversion easy. So I kind of wrote him and said, that's kind of out of the realm of possibility for the price that he was asking for, and basically offered him $4,500 for the car. And at that time, I thought that was a really generous offer for a non-working car. And I always wanted to take a roller and try to restore it and, get it back in working condition and try to flip the car. At the time, he wasn't ready to sell it for such a low price, but we kept in touch. And I kind of gave him some advice on what to do. I said, look, if you are really looking to get your money out of the car, the best thing to do is just to do a 2.5 swap and relist the car as is and try to get close to the $8,000 that you're asking for. Well, 3 months later, he ended up emailing me and offering the car for sale for $3,500. When I took a look at the car, it was in rough shape. There was just a lot of dirt and dust that had collected on the body over the last 6 to 9 months. The paint looked like it was in decent shape if you rubbed some of the dirt off of it. A lot of it just had a lot of buffing that I needed to do to clear up some of the rough spots. It had essentially a stock muffler, mid-pipe, and header. The engine, of course, was blown. There were basically no power modifications to it. It did have Öhlins and the roll bar installed, in addition to some OMP race seats, but those were in rough condition as well. When I walked through the car, I saw that there were other additional things that needed to be done. There was a cracked window. The interior needed to be completely replaced because there was a lot of cracked door panels. There was a cracked center console. The steering wheel was also had dried leather and was cracking. And then the shift knob itself, all the leather was completely worn. So I knew that it needed an entirely new interior. Underneath, there was a lot of oil that was on the undercarriage, and the muffler looked like it had a lot of soot buildup. So once I picked up the car, I went ahead and just towed it over to Dynotronics, and they put in a stock 2.5 engine. There were some issues with the initial install on the way home from the shop. The engine blew due to some bad piston rings, and I had to tow it back to Dynotronics. And I worked with Joe over there, and he put in another engine that was pretty darn healthy. So I drove around with that for about 3 months, but then I started seeing that there was an oil leak or oil accumulation around the oil pan and transmission. So I brought it back over to Dynotronics, and they took care of it for me. He ended up saying that he needed the lift space, so he put in a new engine instead of diagnosing the leak that was currently going on in the car. We ended up having an engine out service at no charge. So while the engine was out, I decided to ask him to put in some cams. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we go over some of the power modifications. And then it took a few months to sort out the third engine as well. There were some issues with the VVT solenoid. I think it had something to do with the wiring on the pigtail, but luckily we got that resolved, and now the car is all sorted. With that, we'll take a deeper dive into some of the modifications I've made. Okay, let's take a look at the engine bay. Okay, the first thing you'll notice is that I have hood struts. So I think this is a good quality of life upgrade. These are from Amazon, and I've had experiences with several different hood struts, and I think these are the best. They're only about $40 on Amazon, and they ship directly from China. Amazingly, they are very similar to the ones that are sold on Goodwin, but they function a lot better. The ones on Goodwin, I guess the gas struts aren't strong enough to give it that initial push. So a lot of times you have to give the hood some help. And when you do that, sometimes on the Goodwin ones, these brackets tend to get pulled on, and when you end up closing the hood, they end up causing a bulge in the hood. The ones from eBay don't have that problem. I also bought the ones from Flying Miata. Those work fairly well, fairly good. The only issue with those are they're about $100. So this being, a fraction of that cost, I think this is a better option to go with. Let's take a look at the motor itself. This is a 2.5 motor from what I suspect is a Ford Fusion. The swap was actually done by Dynotronics. And some of the upgrades I did on it were Brian Crower Stage 2 Plus cams with matching springs. I think it has a really good grunt on the car, and I think this one pulls a lot harder than my competition yellow Miata with the Esslinger Stage 2. In terms of the header, this is the AVO 1.75 ceramic coated header. I had another install video for the header, so if you want to check that out, there'll be a link in the description. This, of course, is the Moroso coolant tank. It has the OEM 16 PSI cap. I think I want to go ahead and replace this with the 20-pound cap. There, you can't really see it in here, but there is an upgraded CSF radiator, as well as an upgraded clutch. I did a separate video of this strut tower brace. This is the Goodwin one. And I think it really dresses up the engine bay, and it gives you access to your adjustment knobs. Before we leave the engine bay, I should probably bring up the lighting. I went ahead and replaced the low beam halogens with LED lights from Hikari. I think these were branded the Eyes of Megatron, and I got them on a Black Friday deal on Amazon for roughly $60. And I think at that price, it was a phenomenal deal. And the lights are pretty amazing. There's a good spread and a crisp white light that it emits. And I think it's a must-do for any NC1 that doesn't have the Xenon package. Okay, let's talk about tires and suspension on this car. These are the FM Miata Kogekis. These are 17x8 with a plus 48 offset. These match the spec MX5 wheel specs. And supposedly you can have these without a fender roll, but as you can see with this car and these tires, I'm gonna need to roll the fenders. These are Falcon RT660s. These are 225 45s. And I have about -2.5 degrees of camber on here. Let's see if I can get you in here. But I'm not 100% sure if I haven't taken this on the track yet because I'm afraid that it's going to rub. When it compresses, I have a suspicion that it's going to rub. So in a separate video, I'm going to do a fender roll in the rears. I think I just need to do a light roll and not do a flat roll. But these supposedly would fit without any fender modifications, maybe some camber adjustments. But I think with these RT660s, they sit really wide, and they're kind of more like a 235 rather than, or maybe even a 245 rather than a 225. Let's come down here and take a look at the exhaust. So this is an RS2 muffler, or Roadster Sport 2. Attached to it is the Goodwin Racing mid-pipe with the Helmholtz chamber. And it's kind of dark, but I have the Progress sway bars in the rear and also in the front. And in terms of end links, right now, those are the Flying Miata end links for the ND Miata. That's just what I had lying around. I ended up buying the end links from Goodwin, so I'm going to go ahead and install those. In terms of brakes, these right now are just stock brake pads. I shouldn't say stock, but these are Akebonos, which are similar to stock. And then I think I just bought like the cheapest set of rotors I can find off of Amazon. I think I ended up paying about $40 for these rears and, and about $50 for the front. The one thing I did end up doing was I ended up painting the hats on these and front and rear. And I don't know, I have a set of Flying Miata slotted rotors that I need to put on this car before I take it to the track. These calipers are original, so they're seeing a little bit of wear, but I think they work fine. I'm gonna go ahead and replace the pads before I go onto the track. I'll probably end up with some G-locks. I have a set of R10 compound for the front, and for the rear I might just do something cheap, like maybe do some Hawk HP Plus in the rear, where I might end up buying the G-Lock R8s in the rear. I'm not sure. If you have any suggestions, put them in the comments. For coilovers, I have the Meister R GT1 Club Race. These replaced a set of Öhlins that came with the car. Those Öhlins had about 50,000 miles on it. And driving the car, I didn't feel like that they were anything special. And I had a friend of mine drive my car, and he basically said that those Olens were shot. He has a set on his car, and he said that they didn't feel anything like the ones that he had. And after driving his, I kind of confirmed it. So I went ahead with this purchase. So these can get pretty expensive. I would say that they're, in terms of price, they're comparable to the Olens. I think new these are around $2,300. I ended up buying a set off of Marketplace for $1,200, and I've had experiences with these before and experiences on the track and on the street. So I think these are awesome. So if it worked for me in the past, I decided just to stick with these, and for that price, I thought it was a worthwhile purchase. Okay, let's take a look at the interior. One of the things that you'll notice is that I replaced the race seats with seats from an NC3 club. These are cloth material, and I think they are an upgrade to the NC1s. They have better bolstering on the top half as well as on the bottom cushion. It also comes with height adjustment, at least on the driver's side. I was able to get this one for a really good deal. It actually came as a pair, and on the passenger side, it was almost new, except that the cloth itself, I think, is a somewhat slightly discolored. As if you can look underneath the seat belt here, the original color was darker. But I was able to pick this up for $150, and then it also came with a driver's seat that had a lot of issues with the side bolster. So if anybody knows me, they know that I am a hoarder of parts, and luckily this time it paid off. I had this driver's side seat sitting in my garage that I had originally bought for my competition yellow car, and was just too lazy to install. I got it for a relatively good price. I think I paid about $150 a year and a half ago, and there's little damage to the side bolster, and overall it's in very good condition. Again, my hoarding instincts have paid off. I bought these door cards from a friend of mine maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and have been hoarding them ever since. When I picked up this gray car, it had some damage to the armrest right over here, right where the mirror buttons are and the locking button is. And I went ahead and replaced this. So you have to replace both the door card and the inner panel as well. Luckily, I was able to get both the inner and outer panels on both sides for $150, which I think is a screaming deal. One of the things I have to commend Mazda on is the quality of their shift knobs. I think that all generations are pretty good, but in particular, the ND feels just about right for me. It has a nice satin metallic collar, and then the shift ball is about the perfect size for me. It feels natural in my hand, and it's nicely weighted as well. I think it weighs slightly more than the NC one, so I seem to get smoother and faster shifts. Okay, this is the Sony XAV AX150. I like these Sony units because it's a single DIN, but it has a double DIN face. And it gives you a little bit more room to hide all your wiring in there, so you don't have to jam it inside of the cavity. It's the cheapest version that Sony made at the time, and amazingly, I was able to find a deal off of Facebook Marketplace for a brand new one for only $150. I think if you look on eBay today, they go for roughly $250. It sounds great, and it does everything that I need. The only drawback on it is that this is not a capacitive screen, but if you do get the higher end model with a capacitive screen, it's glossy. and the way the lighting works in the car, you end up getting a lot of glare here. You don't get to see much of the screen, but with this non-capacitive screen, it's a somewhat of a matte finish, and I think it's easier to see in the daylight. When I upgraded the stereo, I also upgraded the speakers. So this, I can't show it to you because it's already installed, but these were the Infinity reference speakers. I think they are 6x8s, and they have a tweeter already built in. I kept the stock tweeter. This I think is also a great upgrade. I bought it from Crutchfield for about $99, and I think they sound great. One of the other things I did was paint this dash trim. I kind of did this as an experiment. I always wanted to try to do some sort of automotive paint, and I thought this was a safe thing to do because I had an extra trim panel, and this would kind of give me the opportunity to go through all the stages of painting. So the previous, well, this one in particular had a huge scratch in it. So what I ended up doing was filling that up with some body filler and then sanding everything down, priming it, putting on base coat, and doing the clear. I mean, that sounds like it was fairly easy, but for me, it was a huge learning process. One of the first mistakes I made was actually buying paint from eBay, and they have these paint shops that will sell you what they say is color matched paint in an aerosol can. So when I bought that and I painted it up, it was actually a lot darker than the body color or the body panels. And then what I ended up doing was going to O'Reilly's, and they have some stores in the Austin area that will mix up the paint and put it in an aerosol can for you. And I think they did a great color match. So I did that, and I repainted everything and cleared it. And this is probably obvious to a lot of folks, but it wasn't obvious to me. But whenever you apply clear coat, do not, I repeat, do not use isopropyl alcohol to wipe it down. What that ends up doing is it dissolves the clear coat. So I had to let that dry and then resand it and then re-clear it and all that stuff. So that was a big learning experience for me. But I think overall, I was happy that I did it just because I learned a lot from it. But I'm not too sure how well it works color-wise on the car. I don't think it's bad, but I decided to keep it because it adds a nice, unique touch, and I guess it has a little bit something personal for me in the car. Okay, let's talk about this mirror. This is from a Subaru. I forget exactly which model it came out of, but most Subarus, they have a home link down here as well as a compass. And it has a really thin bezel. There's some Mazda versions that are completely frameless, but I think this is thin enough that it still looks good, and you still get the same surface area as you would get from the frameless ones from the OEM Mazda upgrades. One of the things I like to do is install the microphone up on the mirror itself. I think this is a nice way to keep the microphone out of your way, and it's unobtrusive, and you can point it directly to the driver, and it seems to work really well. I always hate having it in the dash. Every time you look down at the tack, you'll see that microphone staring at you. So I think that's a good spot to have it. All right, let's take a look at the dash. So as you can see here, these are custom rev limiter gauges. He has the OEM Plus gauges, and I commissioned, I guess, a custom design where we have this, I guess, Sunstorm yellow tachometer, and then I had him remove, I guess, the kilometer markings on the speedometer. When I did this install, it was fairly easy, but this this cluster was hard to get the tack needle off, and I think when I pulled it out, it actually pulled out the rod. So I'm going to have to take out this cluster and send it over to Adam at Rev Limiter and have him replace the step motor, because I think it indicates that it's idling a little bit higher than what it actually is doing. Okay, let's talk about some future plans for this car. Like I said, initially I was looking at this car as just a general flip opportunity, but just the time it took to sort out the engine and cleaning up the interior, I ended up falling in love with the car, and especially with all the modifications I made. I think the car is pretty well sorted. So I think I'm going to end up keeping it and turning it into a track car, and maybe selling my competition yellow car. But in terms of future upgrades, I'm thinking about doing an NC2 facelift. So that means replacing the headlights, which I already have, a new front bumper, and all of the grille assembly, as well as the fog lights. I've also been able to source all that, and replacing the side skirts as well as the rear bumper back there. So once I do that, I'm going to have the car repainted and resprayed. As you can see here, the front bumper and the fenders and hood don't match, and that's not due to any previous damage or anything like that. It's just that these plastic parts wear differently, or the paint fades at a different rate than the metal paint. I do have some other upgrades I need to perform. As I stated earlier, this has an open diff, and since it's really meant for track duty, I need to do an LSD upgrade or an LSD swap. I have an LSD sitting in the garage here, but the mileage on it is unknown. So I'm thinking about buying a lower mileage LSD from Redline, which they're pretty good about documenting what the mileage is on that. So I'm thinking about selling the one that I have and then just buying a more reputable one from Redline. In terms of the exhaust, I like the way that the current setup is, the way that it sounds, but for the track, I want it to be a little bit louder. That way I can hear what's going on while on the track. I have this, let me bring it out here. I have this race single. This is actually a race single off of my friend's car. And it's just a general, I guess a common race single from Goodwin. But the one thing that he added was a rolled tip. And I think it looks a little bit classier, and I think it actually makes a difference in the way that it sounds. The regular tip doesn't vibrate as much, so this one gives you, I guess, a more throaty sound instead of a raspy sound when you're at full throttle. But that could just be my imagination. I won't really know until I install it. But right now, I'm probably not going to do anything until the fenders are rolled and we get ready for the track.